Welcome to another deep dive with us. This time, we're exploring something that I think you'll find really fascinating, the intersection of spirituality and personal growth, with maybe even a little touch of alternative healing thrown in. You know how much we both love to explore these kinds of topics.
It's definitely a rich area to delve into.
We've got this really intriguing text from the late 1800s called An Introduction to the Theosophy of Christ by a Dr. J.H. Dewey. Have you ever come across this one?
You know, it's not as widely known as some of the other spiritual writings from that era, but it's definitely a hidden gem, in my opinion. Dewey was trying to introduce readers to what he called, and this is a great term, Christian Theosophy.
Christian Theosophy. Okay, yeah, that alone sparks my curiosity. What exactly did he mean by that?
Well, essentially, Dewey believed that there's a divine spark, the Spirit of God, dwelling inside each of us. And this spark is what connects us to something bigger than ourselves, something divine. And he believed it could unlock all sorts of potential within us. It's interesting because this wasn't exactly standard Christian theology back in the 1800s.
No, definitely not. It sounds like Dewey was pushing boundaries even back then. In the early pages, he uses this really powerful analogy of thirst to describe the soul's longing for this connection, like how we crave water when we're really parched.
Yeah. It is a very relatable image, isn't it? I think we can all relate to that feeling, like a deep yearning for something more, Something beyond just our everyday experiences. Have you ever felt that kind of pull in your own life?
Oh, absolutely. I think most people have in one way or another. Now, Dewey also brings up this concept of the triune nature of man, body, soul, and spirit.
Yes.
It's like he's saying there's more to us than what we can see on the surface.
Right, exactly. And it's interesting how he kind of simplifies it. A lot of Eastern theosophy often talks about this sevenfold nature, but Dewey boils it down to this, more manageable model, which I think was a smart move, especially for a Western audience who might not be as familiar with all those Eastern traditions.
Yeah, he's making it a little bit more down to earth and less esoteric. Then he goes on to talk about how much power we actually have within ourselves, which he contrasts with the kind of traditional education that focuses mostly on the external world and the senses.
He's really advocating for turning inward and cultivating our spirit, not just accumulating intellectual knowledge, right? This is something that we grapple with even today. Like, where should we be focusing our energy?
That's so true. It's like he was preempting a lot of these modern self-help and mindfulness trends.
Absolutely.
It's like he's saying true mastery comes from developing our inner world, not just our intellect.
And speaking of examples, Dewey really sees Jesus as like the ultimate model of this kind of spiritual development, right? Exactly, yeah. He says that Jesus achieved this, get ready for it, organic supremacy of the spirit.
Okay, now that's a mouthful.
It is. And that, according to Dewey, is why Jesus could perform miracles and overcome all these limitations that we normally experience.
So he's basically saying Jesus wasn't unique, that his powers were the result of a process that maybe we could all potentially follow.
It's a pretty bold claim, and this is where things get, well, a little bit more interesting, to say the least. Dewey introduces the concept of not just one, but two more senses. We have the sixth and seventh senses, according to him.
Okay, now I have to admit that's where I started raising an eyebrow. Sixth and seventh senses.
I can understand your skepticism, but let's hear him out, right? The sixth sense, as Dewey describes it, is like this deep, intuitive understanding of people and things, even going so far as suggesting that we can potentially communicate with, departed through this sixth sense.
Whoa, okay, that's a lot to unpack there.
It is, and it gets even more profound, or maybe just more out there, depending on your perspective, with the seventh sense. Dewey claims that it allows us to access the wisdom and power of the universe itself.
Okay, now we're getting into some seriously next-level stuff. But the interesting thing is that Dewey insists that developing these senses, as far-fetched as they might sound, is not actually supernatural or reserved for just, like, a select few. He says anyone can do it. He even gives practical exercises for cultivating spiritual awareness.
That's what I find so compelling about his work. You know how much you and I are all about taking action and not just dwelling on abstract concepts, right?
Exactly.
Well, that's what Dewey provides. He gives us tools that anyone can try, like introversion. But I want to be clear, he's not talking about like social introversion being a wallflower.
Right.
It's more about turning your attention inward, away from all the distractions of the external world.
Okay.
He also talks about concentration techniques, which are basically practices for quieting the mind and tapping into that, that inner wisdom that we all possess.
Right. So it's not magic, it's more like a practice, a skill you can develop.
Exactly. And these ideas might sound familiar because they've been around for centuries in various spiritual traditions, but what's really interesting is that science is now starting to confirm some of the benefits of these practices. We're talking about things like meditation, which has been shown to reduce stress, improve focus, and even enhance creativity.
I love how these ancient practices are now getting backed up by scientific research. It really is remarkable.
It is, and it shows that Dewey was really onto something back in the 1800s.
It seems like he was ahead of his time in a lot of ways.
He really was, and he goes even further, claiming that this whole approach, this inward focus, this cultivating of the spirit, can even help us banish disease and negative habits, giving us way more control over our bodies and actions.
Wow. Okay, now, that sounds a lot like those mind cure ideas that were pretty popular back in Dewey's day. But is there any scientific evidence to support that, Can we really just think our way to health and happiness?
Well, there's this really intriguing excerpt from the London Lancet, which, as you know, is a very prestigious medical journal. And surprisingly, they actually acknowledged the power of faith in healing.
Really? That's surprising.
I know, right? They're not necessarily talking about divine intervention or anything like that, but more about the power of belief itself to actually influence our body's natural healing processes.
So it's not a miracle. It's more about tapping into the body's own innate ability to heal itself.
Right, exactly. And this brings us back to Dewey and his emphasis on faith. But he's not talking about blind faith. He sees it as a kind of deep trust in our inherent power to heal and grow.
So it's about cultivating that inner strength and belief in ourselves.
Exactly. And all of this really ties back to his concept of the triune nature of man. Remember, he talks about the body, the soul, and the spirit. He truly believed that our mental and spiritual states have a huge impact on our physical well-being.
It's all interconnected.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder just how much our mental and emotional state can actually influence our physical health, right? Yeah.
It's a fascinating question, isn't it? It makes you think. It really is a head-scratcher. And this is where Dewey's ideas about developing our inner power become really practical. He gives specific exercises that anyone can use. Like, he talks a lot about introversion. And as we clarified before, he's not talking about becoming a hermit or anything.
Right. It's more about shifting our focus.
Exactly. Dewey believed that by quieting the mind, turning our attention inward, we kind of create space for the spirit, that divine spark, to emerge. He compares it to like drawing water from a well. You have to clear away all the debris to get to the pure water below.
I like that analogy. Very visual. So how do we do that? What are some of the practical exercises he suggests?
Well, he recommends things like focusing on a single thought or image. Even something as simple as paying attention to your breath can be a really powerful tool for turning inward. These techniques might sound familiar, and that's because they've been used for centuries in different spiritual traditions.
They remind me of a lot of mindfulness practices that are really popular these days.
Exactly. It's like we're rediscovering these ancient wisdom traditions and finding scientific proof for their effectiveness. Studies show that things like meditation can actually reduce stress, improve focus, and even boost creativity.
It's amazing how much scientific support there is for those practices now.
It really is. Dewey doesn't stop at just introversion, though. He also emphasizes the importance of concentration, which kind of builds on that inward focus.
So it's about going even deeper.
Yes, it's about developing that ability to really focus our attention on a single point, whether it's a thought, an object, or even a spiritual truth. And Dewey doesn't see this as just mental discipline either. He believes that concentrated thought can actually influence reality, like shape our experiences and even bring about healing.
Okay, so he's saying our thoughts aren't just passive, they have an actual impact on the world around us.
Exactly, and this ties into the concept of mind cure, which was popular in his time, and even connects to what we know today about the placebo effect.
Right. The placebo effect is pretty amazing. It shows how powerful our beliefs and expectations can be in shaping our reality, like even physically.
Exactly. Dewey believed that through practices like introversion and concentration, we can strengthen our faith in our own inherent power.
Not faith in something external, but faith in our own inner strength, our ability to heal and grow.
Right, like tapping into that divine spark within.
Exactly. Which brings us back to those higher senses we were talking about earlier, the sixth and seventh senses. Dewey believed these senses are latent within us, but we have to kind of awaken them through spiritual practice.
Yeah, And the sixth sense, remember, is about intuitive knowing, seeing beyond just surface appearances.
Like having this inner compass guiding us towards what's true and authentic. But how do we actually develop that? How do we awaken that sixth sense?
Dewey believed it comes through practice, through paying close attention to our inner experiences, and learning to recognize those little whispers of intuition. Think about a time when you had a gut feeling about something. That's the sixth sense at work.
We've all had those moments where something just felt right or wrong, even if we couldn't explain it logically. So Dewey's suggesting we can actually learn to hone that skill, that inner knowing.
Exactly. He even suggests that with practice, this sixth sense could allow us to communicate with those who have passed on.
Yeah, that's pushing the boundaries of what most people would consider possible.
It definitely challenges our conventional understanding of reality and communication, for sure. But then there's the seventh sense, which is like an even deeper connection.
Right, that's the one where I'm like, okay, now we're getting into some pretty out there territory.
Yeah, Dewey describes it as this experience of the wisdom and power of the universe itself, like a direct connection to the divine. And while he believed it was accessible to anyone, it required deep spiritual development and a willingness to kind of surrender to something larger than ourselves.
It sounds amazing and a little intimidating all at the same time, to be honest. But even if we never quite reach those heights of the seventh sense, even developing that sixth sense, that intuitive knowing, that could have such a powerful impact on our lives, don't you think?
Absolutely. Imagine a world where people were guided by intuition, where they could see through deception and make choices based on a deeper understanding of truth.
That's a beautiful vision. A world that's more authentic and compassionate.
It's definitely something to aspire to. And the best part is, Dewey's giving us the tools to get there, a practical path for awakening those higher senses and cultivating that inner wisdom. He's blending faith, philosophy, and action in a way that feels so relevant even today.
It really does. But I have to imagine that Dewey wasn't without his critics, right? Some people probably found his ideas a little too far out there.
Oh, for sure. He was definitely challenging some of the prevailing scientific and religious views of his time. He was ahead of the curve in a lot of ways, putting forth ideas that are just now starting to gain wider acceptance.
Like the connection between mind and body, the power of belief, and the potential for spiritual experiences to really transform our lives.
Exactly. While some of his claims might sound a little extraordinary, they're actually rooted in a long tradition of spiritual wisdom and are being supported more and more by modern scientific research.
I love that. It's like this beautiful merging of ancient wisdom and modern science. But what I appreciate about Dewey is that he doesn't just present these ideas as abstract concepts. He gives us actual tools and exercises for putting them into practice.
That's what makes his work so compelling, right? He
Yeah.
provides these techniques for cultivating spiritual awareness, developing those higher senses, and using that power within to heal ourselves and transform our lives. It's like he's giving us a roadmap to personal mastery.
And reminding us that we actually have way more power than we realize to shape our experiences and create the lives we want. But I have to say, some of those techniques sound pretty challenging. Like Dewey talks about developing the willpower to control our thoughts and emotions, and even influencing our physical bodies.
Yeah, it definitely takes discipline, commitment, and a willingness to kind of push beyond our comfort zones. But the potential rewards, well, those can be pretty incredible.
Dewey claims that by mastering these techniques, we can overcome limitations, experience greater health and well-being, and even access those deeper levels of knowledge and wisdom that we were talking about.
It's a bold vision, and while it might not be attainable for everyone, the journey itself can be so transformative. It's a path of self-discovery, expanding our awareness and connecting to the divine within. Who knows, maybe along the way we even discover those hidden superpowers Dewey talks about.
The ability to heal ourselves, perceive truth beyond just appearances, and access that wisdom and power of the universe. It definitely sounds worth exploring.
Absolutely. Even if we only achieve a fraction of what Dewey suggests is possible, the journey will be so enriching and enlightening.
This has been such a fascinating conversation. We've covered a lot of ground, talking about both the theory and practice of Dewey's Christian theosophy. But what about real-world examples? Did he offer any evidence to support his claims?
He did. Dewey shares these intriguing stories in his book, anecdotes about people who experienced remarkable healings, profound insights, even what some might call psychic phenomena, all through applying these principles.
It's one thing to talk about these concepts theoretically, but hearing about real-life examples just makes them so much more tangible and believable.
Absolutely. And it gives us a glimpse into what might be possible for us if we're willing to put in the work. But Dewey doesn't just rely on anecdotal evidence. He also draws on the experiences of mystics and spiritual teachers throughout history, people like Jacob Boehme, Van Helmont, and George Fox.
All these figures who had profound spiritual experiences and demonstrated these remarkable abilities through their connection to the divine.
It's as if Dewey is placing his work within a lineage of spiritual wisdom, showing that these ideas aren't new. They've been rediscovered and reinterpreted throughout history.
It speaks to that idea that there's a timeless wisdom, a universal truth that transcends time and culture, something that resonates deep within all of us.
Exactly. And Dewey's Christian Theosophy offers this unique blend of those teachings, weaving together ancient wisdom with Christian principles and a practical approach that feels so relevant in our modern world.
It's such a fascinating combination of faith, philosophy, and action. It reminds us that we have the potential to awaken to our true nature, to live more fulfilling and meaningful lives.
And that journey of awakening, of cultivating those higher senses and harnessing the power within, is a journey open to all of us. It's a journey worth taking.
I completely agree. It's been incredibly eye-opening to explore these ideas with you today.
It's been my pleasure, but there's still so much more to uncover in Dewey's work. We haven't even scratched the surface when it comes to his ideas about healing, the power of faith, and the potential for spiritual transformation.
It's exciting to think about what else we might discover. But for now, I guess we'll have to leave everyone hanging just a little bit. We'll be back soon to continue our deep dive into the fascinating world of Christian theosophy and the power within. Okay, so we're back and ready to really dig into Dewey's ideas about healing. This is where his Christian theosophy really gets down to brass tacks, right? And I know you're all about those actionable steps, not just the theory, but how to actually put these ideas to work.
Oh, absolutely. And Dewey doesn't disappoint in that department. He goes way beyond just treating physical symptoms. He's talking about addressing like the root cause of illness and suffering, which he believed often lies in our thoughts, our beliefs, and even our emotional patterns.
That sounds very much in line with those holistic health approaches that are so popular today.
Yeah, exactly. Dewey was way ahead of his time in recognizing that deep connection between the mind, body, and spirit. He believed that disharmony in the soul could actually manifest as physical ailments.
So we're talking things like negative thoughts, repressed emotions, a lack of spiritual connection. He's saying all those things can contribute to illness.
Exactly. It's about understanding those deeper connections, how our inner and outer worlds really influence each other. And Dewey actually saw Jesus as like the ultimate healer because he understood those connections. Jesus didn't just treat the symptoms, he addressed the whole person. He helped people come back into alignment with their true spiritual nature.
And Dewey believed that we all have the potential to tap into that same healing power within ourselves. It's not just for saints and mystics, right?
Exactly. That's a key point. He believed that the Spirit of God that's dwelling within each of us is actually the source of all healing. It's that same life force that animates the entire universe, and it has the power to restore harmony and wholeness to our bodies and our minds.
So it's like we have this incredible potential just waiting to be unlocked.
Yeah.
But how do we actually access it? What are some steps Dewey lays out?
He talks a lot about the power of faith. But he's not talking about blind faith or wishful thinking. He's talking about this deep trust in the healing power that's within each of us, a real conviction that we are capable of experiencing wholeness and well-being.
So it's more about cultivating a positive mindset and actual expectation of healing.
Yes. Dewey was convinced that our thoughts and beliefs have a real and powerful impact on our physical bodies. He even suggested that, get this, negative thoughts and fears can actually contribute to disease.
Which, again, reminds us of what we know about the placebo effect. Our beliefs can have a measurable impact on our health.
It's incredible, isn't it? And Dewey goes on to outline specific techniques for cultivating faith and directing this healing power. He talks about things like affirmations, consciously choosing those thoughts and beliefs that are actually supportive of healing and well-being.
So it's not just passively hoping to get better. It's about actively choosing thoughts that will actually promote healing.
Exactly. He also emphasizes the power of prayer. But again, he's not talking about petitioning some distant deity. For him, prayer is a way of aligning ourselves with the divine within, that source of healing power that's already present in each of us.
It's more about creating a state of receptivity and openness to the healing energy that's always there.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And Dewey provides specific techniques for this type of prayer that involve things like focusing the mind, cultivating positive emotions, and even visualizing ourselves as whole and healthy.
It sounds a lot like a form of guided meditation, where we're using our imagination to direct the healing process.
You're right, there are definitely some parallels there. And here's what's even more fascinating. Dewey suggests that this type of mental healing can also be used to help other people.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about self-healing. It's about actually extending that healing energy outward.
Yes, exactly. He talks about sending healing thoughts and prayers to others, holding them in the space of love and light and visualizing them as whole and healthy.
It's like we can all be instruments of healing, sharing that divine power with each other. It really speaks to that interconnectedness we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. Do we believe that as we grow spiritually and cultivate these healing abilities, we become more sensitive to the needs of others, more compassionate, and more capable of offering that genuine support?
It's like a vision of a world where healing isn't just confined to hospitals and doctors, but where it's this natural expression of our shared humanity,
Yeah.
that shared divine spark within us all.
It really is. And it's a vision that feels so important today, with so many people looking for alternative approaches to healing, ways to address not just the physical, but the emotional and spiritual aspects of health and well-being as well.
Dewey's Christian Theosophy offers a pretty compelling path forward, wouldn't you say?
I definitely think so. It's been a fascinating journey exploring these ideas. Dewey's work reminds us that we have so much more potential within us than we often realize. We're not limited to our physical bodies or conventional medical approaches. There's a whole other level of healing available to us if we're willing to open ourselves up to it.
It's inspiring, it's challenging, and honestly, a little mind-blowing at times. It really makes you rethink your assumptions about what's possible.
I agree. And it's not just about physical healing either. Dewey also believed the spiritual approach could help us address emotional and mental suffering as well.
It's about healing the whole person, right?
Yeah.
Finding that sense of balance and harmony on all levels, body, mind, and spirit.
Precisely. And he was convinced that as we heal ourselves, we actually contribute to the healing of the world around us. He saw that individual transformation as a ripple effect, spreading outward and creating a more peaceful, just, and compassionate society.
It's a beautiful vision that aligns with so many wisdom traditions throughout history. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness and understanding that our own personal transformation can actually lead to collective healing.
And that's where Dewey's work really shines. It's about weaving together those timeless truths with a distinctly Christian perspective.
It really is a unique blend that speaks to people seeking a spiritual path that integrates faith and action. I think it's safe to say this deep dive into Dewey's Christian Theosophy has been incredibly insightful. It's a fascinating blend of faith, philosophy, and practical techniques for personal transformation and healing. And it really highlights the power we all have within to tap into that wellspring of wisdom and healing.
It really does. And it encourages us to take a more holistic and spiritual approach to life as well. While some of his ideas might seem a little out there, they invite us to think bigger, to expand our understanding of what's possible.
He's encouraging us to really step into our full potential.
And that journey of self-discovery, healing, and transformation, it's a journey that's available to all of us. Who knows what we might find along the way?
It's definitely a journey worth taking. So if Dewey's right, and each of us really does have that divine spark within, what are we waiting for? Let's explore these ideas, experiment with these techniques, and just see what unfolds. Maybe there's more to this world and to ourselves than we ever imagined. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.